Welcome to Man 360. I'm your host, Brian. On today's program, I get to go fishing with Royce Railey of the CTN program Tightline, and you'll get to see if I catch anything. We had a great time and even better conversation about his ministry, Go Fish, and talked about how his program Tightline got started, including some testimonies from viewers. Later in the program, I do a review of the book Unoffendable by Brant Hansen. I read this book a couple of years ago, and it really challenged me on so many levels in evaluating the things that offend in life. I also share about the circumstances in life that motivate us to change. In between my conversation with Royce and the book review, we have a travel segment that I'm not going to share too much about because it was so fun and unusual. Stay tuned because you're not going to want to miss it. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started. Welcome to Man 360. When we were in Columbus, Georgia visiting our CTN station, I got a chance to go fishing with Royce Railey, host of the popular program Tightline. We had a great time with Royce and our cameraman Alex fishing for brim and largemouth bass in a private pond in the area. Royce shared about how he got into fishing, some testimonies he has received from Tightline, and his fishing ministry called Go Fish. I loved Royce's heart when he shared about using his gifts to glorify God and reach people for Jesus. Here's my conversation with the host of Tightline and fisher of men, Royce Railey. So Royce, thank you for being on Man 360.
Absolutely.
Funny how you're on my program, but actually I'm right now on your program, Tightline.
Yep.
And we're actually out here at a lake, private lake. Mm-hmm. But I wanted you to talk just real quickly about your time growing up and how you knew that you wanted to be a fisherman, maybe some time with your dad and that time.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up here near Columbus, Georgia, and my dad always loved to fish. My dad was a crappie fisherman. That doesn't mean he's a bad fisherman.
Yeah, it's terrible.
It means he fished for crappie. So I grew up pan fishing.
Okay.
But about the time I was 9 years old, 10 years old, I caught my first bass ever. And that literally kind of hooked me on the sport of bass fishing. And so my dad and I kind of learned how to bass fish together. I started fishing all through high school, reading everything I could read about bass fishing, you know, watching Roland Martin, Hank Parker on TV,
Yes.
those kind of things, and just loved it, just fell in love with it. Went to college, got out of college and started fishing tournaments and that kind of thing. And, you know, it's just, to me, it's something you're born with. You know, it's like guys that love to be in the woods deer hunting. For me, bass fishing's that way. From a very, very young age, I just fell in love with it and want to do it all the time.
Yeah, and now you have actually a ministry called Go Fish Ministries. So share a little bit about Go Fish.
Boy, it's hard to talk when
I know you
fish
hear
are
that.
blowing up in the background.
It's not the wind where we both turn around and look.
I was a youth pastor for a long time, but spent a lot of time with students and parents in a boat. You know, it was a great time to share Christ with them or encourage them in their faith. And just a series of events at the end of my last time at my last church, we were getting lots of opportunities to share Christ through fishing and the outdoors and those. In fact, it was at a tournament at Lake Okeechobee. It was real cold and everybody was leaving, and I stuck it out and actually drew a guy I wasn't supposed to draw out with and got to share the gospel with him in my boat. And on that 10-hour drive home, I was like, man, it'd be cool if we could do that all the time, using fishing and the outdoors to share Christ with people. And so in April of 2011, we launched Go Fish Ministries, and our ministry is based on 1 Peter 4:10, which says, each one should use whatever gift God's given you to serve others.
That's great.
Faithfully administering God's grace in its various forms. And so that's what we do. A lot of it looks like fishing tournaments and sharing Christ that way, speaking at men's events. But in the summer, my family and I do a lot of kids camps and things like that. We partner with some other ministries. We do some prison ministry things. So looks like a lot of different things, but it's really using the things that we're passionate about, things we love to do to share Christ with others.
Really, which is the best way to share Christ, because you're already passionate about what you're doing. You're not trying to manufacture some excitement. And also, you're connecting with like-minded people. You know, to be able to minister. You know, I always think it's interesting about who Jesus called as far as the disciples and their different backgrounds. And even though he used the term and the kind of the terminology of fishers of men, you know, where it was to go and bring your gifts and go and reach people for my sake. And that's really what you're doing, I feel like, with Go Fish. So also with Tightline, with your program Tightline that plays on CTN, like, how did that start? And share a little bit about Tightline too.
Yeah, it's a funny story because I actually got invited to be on an interview show on a local CTN affiliate, and it's a ladies talk show. So I walk in the room with all my bass fishing stuff on, and there's all these ladies in their big hats and their corsages, and they're talking about recipes and stuff. And it was great though, I got to share what we do. And the guy that was running the camera was a guy named Alex Thompson, who worked there. Said, hey man, I've always wanted to use my gifts to produce a Christian-based fishing television show. Would you be interested? And of course, I grew up watching those guys, and yeah, absolutely. And so that year we filmed a couple of segments, and he sent it to some guys at CTN, and they liked what we did, and we started there. And now we're filming season 4, which is on CTN, and then we also put it on YouTube. But the idea is we want to be real specific about a couple of things. We want you to leave our show being able to do the technique that we did that show. In other words, we want to be very specific about teaching, but most importantly, we want to share the gospel with people, encouraging them in their faith. So in the middle of every show, we do about a 3 or 4 minute devotion, and we share the gospel. And
I know it plays around the country. I know we play it in multiple stations for CTN. And I know Yolanda and I've talked about, we just love the ministry aspect. Very similar to Man 360, we were talking about how we don't just want to talk about Jesus, that's very, very important. But also we need some bait, as they say, in entertainment to pull people in. You literally with bait, literally using bait to pull men in. Us using other funny stuff that we do. So just share a couple of testimonies maybe of people that have interacted with you, or maybe saw you at a convention or a church or something about what you do with Tightline.
There have been times, like Alex and I were down on the river one time, and this guy waved us over from the bank.
They're hitting, I'll be over in a little bit.
And so we went over there, and he was just thanking us, for how much it meant to him to have a show like that, and how it encouraged him in his walk. Probably my most memorable story, I was walking in store Five Below with my son one day. No, it was actually my daughter. And we're looking for something, a phone case, I don't remember what, but this guy looks up, he's stocking shelves, he's got on a headset, and he looks up and he says, "You're that guy. You're that guy." And he runs at me and gives me this gigantic bear hug. It's scared to death, And I'm like, what in the world? And he's a real young guy, and he's crying. And he says, I watch your show, and it's my quality time with my 3-year-old son every Saturday. And we sit down and we talk about what you talked about. We talk about fishing.
That's great.
And he said, and this was a really cool part that encouraged me. He said, I'm a dancer. I'm a dance instructor. And he said, what I want to do with our ministry is what you do. Use dance to share Christ with these kids that are learning. So
that's awesome.
Several stories, but that one sticks out the most.
That's great. That's great. Well, Royce, thank you for being on Man 360.
Thank you, man.
Thanks for having me out.
Yeah, thanks for fishing with me today.
Yeah, you outfished me, but you got 2 fish on 1. They'll see in the program when they watch Tightline. And also, too, we'll provide a link for Tightline on our additional content page for Man 360 for people to connect with you. So
absolutely. Thanks, if we can ever do anything to serve anybody out there, we'd love to. Love talking fishing and sharing the gospel. So thanks so much.
That's great. Thank you.
Yep.
Unclaimed Baggage does 3 things with the items that they receive. First of all is they resell. So we're here at their facility in Alabama. You can also go online and check it out. They also repurpose some of the items, which they partner with all kinds of nonprofits globally around the world and be able to donate things from what they receive. And they also recycle. So they get rid of anything that they can't sell or give away. Oh, no, you gotta see the back.
Oh my goodness, look at that. Look at the style.
So go to my Facebook page and tell me if you think this is something I should buy. So I don't think this will fit me, but I was considering it for our Christian television network Christmas party this year. Look like 46 long to you? Okay, 46 long. This is not a 46 long. Okay, so I just saw they have watches here. We're gonna see what they have.
You are going to unzip this bag, go through every item. You're going to make one of 4 choices for me.
Okay.
Clean it, sell it, recycle, or give it away.
Okay, yes.
What do you think? You ready?
Let's do it.
Trade me places, sir.
All right. You ready?
Drum roll. Oh my.
Oh my gosh!
The whole store.
It's a curtain!
What in the world? Come on.
It's a gag gift.
Wow. I have,
Someone's wedding was a shambles.
boy, oh boy. This was the crying towel.
That was
What
it.
do you think?
The crying towel.
You like that? Yeah. Check the pockets for me.
All right.
I can't believe that bag felt like it was stuffed. Well, guess what?
it.
You get to hang out with me while I do my spiel. Is that cool?
That's great.
All right. Unclaimed Baggage was founded back in 1970 by Doyle and Sue Owens. He borrowed $300 in a pickup truck, drove to Washington, D.C., and bought his first load of luggage. Sold out the same day.
Wow.
52 years later, here we are.
That's amazing.
Here's the fun part. In the course of 52 years, you can only imagine that there have been some wild and exciting things come across in these suitcases. You want to take a chance on what the wildest, weirdest, most exciting thing was?
Well, I read the website, so
Oh, you already
Shrunken
know?
Head,
Ooh, well, that is one of them, but it's not the weirdest.
the weirdest. I don't know.
Wildest? Live rattlesnake.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that you let me do it.
I was wondering, is there a live rattlesnake in here?
No, that's why somebody else goes through this. I know, buried. Well, so Live Shrunken Heads was also one of the cool things. A full suit of armor, vacuum-packed frogs. Next time I fly, you gotta fly out of
Sea
here
monkeys?
too.
Were there sea monkeys in there? Okay.
Not yet.
Okay.
So can we expect
So I'll
your
pack
bag?
some, lose them in 3 months, and you guys can unpack them.
There you go. There you go. Well, let me tell you about the most expensive item that we have come across and sold. A Rolex Presidential Platinum
wow.
man's watch. Retailed for $64,000. We sold it for $32,000 in 2014. I got to meet the gentleman who bought that. He's just as excited now as he was back when he made the initial purchase.
Yolanda and I had a great time shopping at Unclaimed Baggage, and we hope you'll check out their online store or get to visit their facility someday. One of the special things we also did was learn about the ministry arm of their business called Reclaimed for Good. Here's my conversation with PR and Community Involvement Director, Sunny Hood. I'm here with Sunny, and I wanted her to share a little bit about who she is and what she does here at Unclaimed Baggage.
Well, my name is Sunny, like you said, and I am the PR and Community Relations Manager here at Unclaimed Baggage. So I do several things, one of which is handling some of our media relations, because Unclaimed Baggage, you know, we're so unique. So we have influencers and YouTubers and bloggers and journalists reaching out to us on a very regular basis. So I get to coordinate and speak to those people. I also have a hand in our Reclaim for Good charitable foundation and some of the efforts that we do in our community, because that's something that's very important to us, is that we're involved in our community. It's a town of about 16,000, and we're one of the largest employers in Jackson County, so we really want to make sure that we're taking care of those in our own backyard. And the list really goes on. So I wear many hats here. Yeah.
So can you talk specifically about some things that you've done, and maybe people that you've partnered with specifically, and just what's been the reach of your arm?
So Reclaim for Good, our charitable foundation side of the business, truly is the heartbeat behind what Unclaimed Baggage does. So our mission is to redeem the lost, unclaimed, and rejected for the glory of God. So we receive, you know, thousands of items annually, and on average, a third is sold, a third is recycled, and a third is donated. And we certainly try to err on the side of donation versus recycling when we can. So some examples of how we're able to redeem these lost items through donations are: one, we're the top provider of prescription eyeglasses to the Lions Club International,
That's great.
where they receive these boxes of eyeglasses, and they have missions where they take optometrists and they go to different countries. I think Mexico is one in particular, and they pair people who don't have access to eye care or to these resources, and they pair them so that they can see. And I don't know about you, but I wear contacts, so if I didn't have contacts
reading
or
glasses for me,
I mean, that's just something I think a lot of us take for granted.
Yeah.
We actually heard one story about how there was a single mother in Mexico who worked in the textile industry, and her eyesight had just deteriorated and she couldn't work. And so she was paired with some of our Reclaim for Good eyeglasses, and that allowed her to go back to work to be able to provide for herself and for her son. So we know that these items truly do make a difference. Another example is that we receive a lot of wheelchairs, canes, crutches. We kind of joke, we don't know how people went onto an airplane and then came off without a wheelchair. You know, we're like, maybe a miracle was happening on the plane. We don't know.
Salvation, miracles, and healing.
But we receive a lot of wheelchairs. So we partner with a ministry. It's under the branch of Joni and Friends. They have a ministry called Wheels for the World. And it's actually a prison ministry. So broken down wheelchairs are taken into the prisons, and then the inmates are given the purpose or the job to kind of refurbish these wheelchairs, and then they're distributed all around the globe to people, again, who don't have access to those sorts of resources.
So do you have, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Do you have another group of people that actually refurbish and do some of the things to actually get things up to standard before you release them out?
So, no. So our donations are donated as is. So for example, you know, the wheelchairs, if they're brought to us broken, we are able to kind of locate these organizations that have the bandwidth to do what we can't. So another example would be military items. Okay, what if we receive medals or things like that? Well, we have organizations here that we can donate it to them, and they do have the bandwidth to be able to find, you know, the families or the person that belonged to. Millions of dollars worth of clothing and items like that are donated to organizations like homeless shelters or, you know, thrift stores that donate their proceeds to great causes or things of that nature. One really cool way that we give back, and unique, I think, is gift cards. So we receive so many gift cards. And we have learned, let's not toss those into recycling. Let's check the balances on those, and then we use them solely for donations. Maybe there's someone on our team or in the community who needs a hot meal. Well, we can grab a Walmart gift card or a McDonald's gift card and go provide a hot meal for the night.
That is awesome.
And so that's one way that we can really be creative in the way that we give back, is through Reclaim for Good gift cards.
Sunny, thank you for sharing.
Well, thank
you.
you.
So amazing. It was great to meet you.
You too.
And we just pray continued blessings on you guys and what you're doing, and also just that you guys will continue to build those partnerships to reach even more people.
Well, thank you very much.
I really enjoyed reading this book by Brant Hansen, Unoffendable. And actually I had a pastor friend that had talked to me about it, and she said it really helped challenge her in the process of being offended, and really kind of keeping some of those things in check. And before I get into the full book review, I want to just share real quickly about the facts about change in life. So change in life doesn't happen unless you see value in something that you're not doing and then decide to make that change. So Yolanda and I just got back from a driving trip. We were driving around the United States for some of our stations for CTN. And if I'm on this very bouncy, bumpy road and I look over and I value what that other lane is, which is very smooth, I can either choose to stay in the lane I'm in, or if I see that that's more valuable and a better lane, I can switch over and change over into that other lane and actually have it be a smooth ride. And it very similarly, we live lives based on value. So we spend our time, our money, our attention, really our entire life on things that we value. And what we value, we take care of. So the author helps the reader evaluate what they value primarily with their anger or with being offended. So page 5 kind of sets the stage for the book, and this is a statement from the book, that we like being angry because we tend to side with ourselves when we get offended. So Brant shares here, he says, we won't often admit this, but we like being angry. We don't like what causes the anger, to be sure, but we just like thinking we've got something on someone. So-and-so did something wrong, and sometimes horribly wrong, and anger offers us a sense of moral superiority. That's why we call it righteous anger. After all, it's moral and good, we want to think. Problem is, righteous anger directed at someone is pretty tricky. It turns out that I tend to find Brant Hansen's anger more righteous than other anger. That's because I'm so darn right. And then in page 7, he talks about the contrast of anger and love, and that anger is extraordinarily easy and it's our default setting, but that love is very difficult. And I love this. He says love is a miracle. So here he says, he said, today I read an article in Inc. magazine about anger and Martin Luther King Jr. The author quoted King's autobiography when he wrote, "You must not harbor anger." But that's not all. Even when attacked, wrote King, we should love our enemies. The author did the usual thing and spun King's statement into something of an endorsement of anger, saying we should just make sure we use anger constructively. Fair enough, but I disagree with the author, and I really like what he says here. A couple of things are remarkable about this article, one being that the author purports to agree with Martin Luther King Jr. while saying something nearly the opposite. At a minimum, it's much less radical and far less poetic. King says, I must not harbor anger, and the author says, I agree, let's use our anger constructively. I think we do this with Jesus all the time. We take something like, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, and tack on, but really holding on to anger is justified. So he really talks through and continues to shape how some things that we do, I think, in just religious circles, when we talk about anger specifically, and the book is really a process and a challenge to release that anger and to release those thoughts. So the other piece too that I want to talk about was on page 8, he says that anger doesn't enhance judgment. And he talks about seek justice, love, and mercy. You don't have to be angry to do that. People say we have to get angry to fight injustice, but I've noticed that the best police officers don't do their jobs in anger. The best soldiers don't function out of anger. And he says anger does not enhance judgment. So even talking about the point of anger as Christians, we read sometimes in the Bible, we see where Jesus got upset and some of those things happen. But then further into the book, and I'm only going to talk about really kind of 3 sections of the book today. The one thing about Unoffendable also is that it's really just a story about him telling some of his life interactions, and he put those into a book. So it's a very easy read, it's a very quick read. But page 94, I love where he says this. He talks about anger and action. The difference between anger and action and men's response to being angry, and this is what he says. Anger and action are 2 very different things, and confusing the 2 actually hurts our efforts to see things or to set things right. Check out Twitter sometimes. You can see anger all over the place. People upset about this and taking a stand on that. This isn't surprising. Of course, we're all thankful for the right to speak our minds, but here's what's odd about this confusion when it comes to injustice, anger, and action. According to a research from the University of British Columbia, if you click like or help poor children of wherever, you're actually less likely to give actual money to help an actual poor child of wherever. It's called slacktivism. So let's face it, we're positively in love with taking stands that cost us absolutely nothing. We even get to be fashionable in the process. He continues on. We get to think we're involved doing something, and if we're angry, we get to say my anger is righteous anger, and since it's righteous anger, it stands to reason that we're actually more righteous than the people who aren't angry like we are. The myth of righteous anger actually impedes the taking action because it lets us congratulate ourselves for a feeling rather than for doing something. Meanwhile, someone else who didn't tweet about it, didn't get the bumper sticker, and didn't click the like on the cause is actually sacrificing his or her time and treasure to do things and genuinely benefit the poor children of wherever. And then he talks about another book that is about a book in his book that actually kind of highlights the epidemic from people that there's a lower percentage of people that actually do something to instigate change if they like something because they feel like they've already done that piece of it. So on page 191, in the back of the book, he says, if there's important, and I'm going to wrap with this, about choosing ahead of time not to be offended. So, and then there's their results. So when we choose ahead of time, before conversations, before meetings, before our day begins to be unoffendable, we're simply choosing humility. And one thing that he highlights also in the book, he talks about how this isn't just an easy concept, right? So if there's something that happens in our life and we feel like we want to change and we want to shift towards that, it's probably going to be something that's going to have some kind of effort behind it. Continues on, he said, and while yes, anger happens, as we discussed earlier, it happens so much less for people whose egos are not before meetings, inflamed, and who have so little to lose or gain from the approval of others. Humility means there's so much less at stake, so much less to protect. You'll become difficult to offend simply because there's so much less of you to defend. I'm going to read that again. You'll become difficult to offend simply because there's so much less of you to defend. When you're headed into a stressful social situation with difficult, offensive people, and you decide in advance, I'm not going to let those people offend me. I'm forgiving them in advance. You're dying to yourself. You're sacrificing yourself on their behalf. You are making yourself less. You're willingly giving up your own interests and desires because you have your conviction about who Jesus is. And Jesus tells us there's a reward for this. Those who want to save their lives will give up true life, and those who give up their lives for me will have true life. And this is in Matthew 16:25. At the beginning of this book, we talked about the crazy idea that we are not entitled to anger and how taking this idea seriously actually opens up new dimensions of rest, grace, and simplicity in our lives. We are above all embracing a radical humility. We're denying ourselves, doing something seemingly self-negating, and then finding that, just as Jesus promised, we haven't lost anything, we've only gained life. So we need to always be evaluating ourselves with the Bible and its teachings as the plumb line. And books like Unoffendable are great catalysts for helping us move from where we are in our thinking to where Jesus wants us to be. I hope this book review encourages you to grow in your walk with the Lord. Let's do our 360-degree review of today's program. Royce Railey is a perfect example of what it means to use the natural gifts God gives us to reach people for Jesus. Tightline is a mixture of education and practical fishing tips and a devotional every program for people who like fishing. Hopefully our conversation about his ministry, Go Fish, encouraged you to look at your gifts and talents that God can use even though they may not seem traditional. Those things have the potential to do amazing work for the kingdom if we're willing to be used by Him. You can see more information about Tightline and Go Fish on the additional content page of man360.tv. Our trip to Unclaimed Baggage was an amazing surprise, and me getting to open a piece of unclaimed luggage was fun even though it was just material. When I was talking to the public relations rep, Sonny, I loved hearing about the charity work they do with multiple nonprofits around the country. Their business model is much more than just to make a profit. It's to try and find the use for everything they receive and do it all for the glory of God. The book Unoffendable represents something that we should all strive for, being good at forgiving people, loving people like Jesus, and letting God be fully in charge of our lives. The key is us letting go and trusting that God knows this life better than we do. For a link to purchase the book, you can go to our website. Man360 exists for men to be complete in every way through Christ, mentally, physically, and spiritually. You can always connect with us on our website, Facebook, or Instagram, and we'll see you next week, right here on Man360.